So in 2014 and 2015, we commissioned a survey in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. At the time we were about to go into Burundi, Burundi went belly up. So as I said, we are an East African institute, we focus on these 5 countries. But as the political horizon of the polity of East Africa expands, we shall find ourselves in places like South Sudan, which is going to be the next member state of the East African community. So, as anybody else would ask, what is the purpose of the survey? Why did we do this? And I've made references to that. And just to paraphrase Edmund Burke, who's a political theorist and philosopher, Irish guy, and he lived in the 18th century. If we understand the values and attitudes, concerns and aspirations of young people, we can shape what the future could look like. That is our conviction. That if we understand what the young people are thinking today, and begin to build that systematically in the way that our government thinks and plans, and in the way that we as parents try to work with young people to meet those aspirations, we can get a firm handle on the future. I don't believe in this saying of the future belonging to some misty horizon. The future is in the active making now. We are in the active employment of constructing the future. And the things that we do and don't do will have huge consequences going forward.
When Dr. Awiti finally called me and said, let's have this discussion, I was very excited for 2 reasons. One, we make policy, and not just in this country, but I think across the continent. We make policy, we make decisions, including availing funds for young people. But nobody has ever really asked the young people what they want, what aspirations they have, what are their dreams, what do they need to get there. And with a population that's 80% made up of young people, it's beyond reason to me why nobody ever thought to ask the youth what they want.
Living young, wild and free car VMC. Respect to all parties, especially MR Siniwazi, Punchlines and Albufeska Omar Manwazi. Wana resign speedy sababu ya governor. And still wameshindwa ku maintain speed governor. Sleeping sickness kwa bunge nikawa wameaffectiwa na Ghana. African Cup this time ni kati ya Kenya na Ghana. EPA na support noisy neighbor, not the Ghana. Kempa wako na lipo monthly piro na complain yako lipa anam. Jaribu kunidisi uchomeke kwa jeanam. Ako academic assembly jumefail function na granam. Aligeta rapa hatari na flow kwa ribatana. Tunatoa vitu modern sona muungatana. Wanalia msoto na oil iko chukana.
One of the reasons why IDRC decided to fund the East Africa Dialogue series was we believe very much that promoting dialogue, promoting understanding through science, through research, through the provision of data, which informs us about really important questions. That process of informed dialogue is a way to support and strengthen society, social processes, the processes by which society recreates itself, becomes more resilient, and addresses the problems that really confront the majority of its populace.
I commend Alex and his team for focusing this first East African dialogue on the question of youth. The figures Alex provided with regard to the demographic weight of youth in this part of the world speak for themselves, but it's not just an African issue. Even in Canada, issues of youth are so important that our new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has retained the youth portfolio for himself. So our Prime Minister is also the Minister for Youth in Canada, and that speaks volumes to the importance that we attach as Canadians to this issue. It really is incumbent on government, it's incumbent on the partners of government to take action forward, responding to the opportunities and challenges that the research speaks to.
And I think every person in the country should be reading this, going onto the website of the Aga Khan University to find out what this launch is about, what young people are saying, how they feel about themselves, and how we as a country and in our communities can support young people to realize their potential and to become participating young people who financially are independent.
the future. The future. Because I want to make it clear before you launch, I think the youth are extremely clever. The youth see what we do. So let's not blame them. We are the ones who are corrupt. And I can tell you an example. 2012, our son was in Strathmore. They went to Mombasa with a son of another very high government officer. He had retired. And there were 12 of them. Yes, that son told the other boys, I know my father is a thief. Actually, they were staying in the father's house in Mombasa. And they say, my father is a thief. I've worked with him for many years, and I think he's one. So this is what Alex and all the others are doing. There are a lot of studies, by the way, with the World Bank, everybody. We want to get what key things are we getting, what information are we getting here. But notice that that must drive the better policies. This is where I come in. This is where the government comes in. This is where the private sector, this is where everybody comes in. It's not just to government. This is where the fourth estate comes in, pushing it.
And how are the youth being treated today?
Okay, right now all eyes are on the youths. Anything they do, everyone is looking at the youths. But with the Kenyan mentality of people, they only like focusing on the negative part of whatever someone is doing, and leaving aside the better thing that the youths are doing.
Yes, now we've said that, a majority of the youth look up to their religious leaders. Do you believe, as a young person, that you get the sort of values you require from your religious leader, be that the mosque, even the young people you talk to, be that the mosque, the church, the Hindu temples, or wherever? Do you think there are enough good examples?
Advice is good, but not all advice is good.
Explain.
Because if I'm seated here with you, you telling me what I'm supposed to do. It's upon me to say, to choose on whatever you told me, to filter and know what is right for me and what's not right for me.
Okay. Do you believe you have to then filter what your religious leaders are telling you, the advice they're giving you?
Of course.
So you want to filter that?
We have to
Why?
filter because as much as they are our religious leaders, yes, but they're humans.
That rings true with you, doesn't it, Sheikh, in terms of, especially even when you're talking about radicalization and knowing, who's rogue and who's not, and even with the bad examples we see, for example, within the Christian church of certain pastors taking advantage of people.
Yes, it does. Because if you take the example of the late Abu Drogo, he had a much more impact than what most of us sheikhs have today. So we psychologically are trying to understand what is it that he was using, because most of what he was saying were lies. We found out. But he was very attractive to the youth. Even today, if you speak against him, you might get a beating. Yes, when our Mombasa mosques were closed, that is the time when CIPK came to Nairobi, and I was pushed to the forefront just because I was a youngster. Because they were demanding, it's time for you elders to go. And I think this is one of the cultures that should change. Every elder should groom a youngster to take over.
Look at your fingers. They're different. And even children born of the family, with the same mother and the same father, are all different. Different talents. And when you come to religion and to the faith, yes, I want to acknowledge, and has been seen, that there are some religious leaders who have used the podium for their own gain. And you see, recently what is happening, regulation of registration of religious institutional societies, because some have gone overboard in a manner that what do they really want? They want to get quick riches, as I've said, where some preach a prosperity. We draw our doctrines from the commands of God. And what is good for a Christian is the same that good for a Muslim. And therefore, regionalizing means that faith has to be gained from the family. The family upbringing also impact in faith.
To me, it's very surprising. Not very surprising because I live here, but to have a very different data, for example, that says they believe in faith, at the same time they believe in corruption. What does that tell us about what you guys are doing? I mean, are we believing in the theory of religion only? I mean, religion is for Sunday and Friday. After that, we can do what we have to do. And by the way, Sheikh Khan, I think just a slight, my data, the ones that I collected, showed that at the coast of Kenya, that it's actually not being over religious, like you said, that leads to extremism. Most of the people that I talk to in interviews and focus group discussions, I mean, the data that I have revealed that most of them had very minimal knowledge of religion. So, like, they would tell you something like, we're supposed to fight jihad. So, probe them further and ask them what is jihad. They don't even understand what jihad is. So, what are you guys doing to make sure that people understand the religion in practice, to respect the values that, we've been talking about here since morning?
This conversation is not going to change in 100 years if the whole issue around youth employment is not addressed. Whether that is manufacturing based, whether we are expanding our industrial base, in 100 years we'll meet in this very same room, inshallah, and we'll have the same sort of conversation. Thank you.
Now, thinking that we want to be one unit, would it be a consideration to religious leaders and religious groups to think of us, for instance, teaching religious education in terms of the values that run across the religions? Because when you look at what the religions stand for, it's exactly the same thing.
Great.
But at some point, it's like at school, we are already beginning to segregate these kids into the different groups. So would that be a consideration? And if it is, do we think this would probably lead us to a better place? So that in school, we are talking of religious education in terms of the values. And on my Sunday and my Saturday and my Friday, when I go to church, I deal with my individual church.
When I go around to the universities, Multimedia University, Kenyatta University, University of Nairobi, and we talk to these youngsters, these guys are so energized that it's so hard to convince them not to go to ISIS. I have done it personally. It's very hard to tell them that what is happening there is wrong. And they give you proof. Because these rogue sheikhs and these rogue clerics are so modernized, they are on the internet. They've got 1,000 Facebook pages. And what are we doing? Just using the pulpit? How much can you get to? We'll only get to the educated sect or those who believe in you. And those who are on the internet, the first thing they do is to make sure they polarize you as that idiot who is going against jihad. I myself, I've been called a kafir by Al-Shabaab. Okay? And I know I'm being targeted. So if you hear the news, don't be worried. But I will not be cowered into silence. My chairman, Sheikh Muhammad Idris, was killed. Why? Because he told them what you are doing is wrong. So it is time, especially I need the help of all of you. Because most of our sheikhs, when it comes to modern technology, they are uneducated.
We need to look at values beyond churches and mosques and ask ourselves, what is the national value, Kenya's value, Africa's value, so that that drives the agenda. And then religion can support what we'd like to achieve as a country. And if you compare youth in Africa and youth in developed countries, you'll meet youth who want to solve problems. You'll meet youth who want to come to Africa to do some projects. You meet the youth in our part of the world because we don't have values as a nation, as a continent, then they're just looking up to people to help them and pour ice cubes on them. We don't want to pour ice cubes on you because you'll join us soon in this other part of the world. Thank you.
What is happening is that every time we are hearing this youth is different, their thinking is different, their way of life is different, but at the bottom line, values are values. 100 years ago, 100 years to come, the values will be the same. How is it as I said, my question is to Dennis. How do we expect to instill these values in the youth? What do you need from us for us to instill those values? They don't change. Respect, all those things. How do we instill those values?
You know, youths are so aggressive, right? They want to see what is behind what is hidden. But in this case, the curiosity doesn't kill the youths. It actually informs them. And you know, information is knowledge. So when the youths get this aggressiveness to want just to go for what is hidden from them.
And part of the thing that I always feel is if we figure out ways of working together, even when you go past being youth, you still continue to work on youth issues. It's not something you're doing for yourself. It's something you're doing for us. And secondly, I'm also very troubled by this thing of our role models are only politicians and musicians and celebrities. Because we do have positive role models among musicians. I'm thinking of people like Susanna Wiyok, straight off the top of my head, who are doing such amazing things.
People don't really know that there is a connection between the elders and we as youths, because the elders guide us through what we are supposed to do the right way. And if by any chance they mislead us, that means that we definitely have to go astray because we do follow footsteps.
I think the one thing that stands out, even for the Sheikh, as he said in the last panel, was the youth and their perceptions on corruption. John, I'd like to start with you because that is what we know you for. Does this, the war against corruption, excuse me, sorry, no need to roll your eyes about that. Do these findings surprise you amongst the youth? I know we focus a lot on establishment, institutions, you know, government. But now you take a look at youth and they're saying, you know, I'm willing to make money any which way as long as I don't get caught. And I imagine, I don't know if that was a follow-up question, but that, you know, if I get caught, I can try and bribe my way out of it. I'm imagining.
Actually, the results don't surprise me at all. For 50 years, that has been the case in this country. That those who are corrupt, and these days I don't use the word corruption because I find it doesn't resonate that much at the grassroots. Those who are engaged in theft, thieves, those who engage in theft have prospered in this society for 50 years. So I don't think I'm going to hammer the youth too hard because they've seen their fathers do it. We had an example given to us this morning by one of the speakers where two young people speaking and one is saying, my father is a thief, and feels quite calm about it. We've lost our sense of social sanction with regard to theft. And amongst our African communities, all our different communities, crimes against property in particular, if one stole from the commons, the punishments were usually more severe than those that were meted out for crimes against person. You could break somebody's leg, but don't steal their cow. And we've lost that.
Where is your own responsibility, and how are we dealing with that among youth? That the youth have to stop, at this point, thinking collectively. Because what we've done, the same way we do in the classical development aid, is that not only do we call Africa a country, which is one of my biggest myths, but that we call us poor, which we have to redefine. We also have to stop talking about the youth, because who are the youth? They're individuals. And the minute you talk about them as youth, you remove the individual responsibility from each individual who is a youth. And that is the problem here. And this is not covered, not for lack of. I think it just never crossed people's minds that actually ask the young person, what is their responsibility? We work with 4 to 25-year-olds, and every single one of these kids are responsible for what happens to them. Our biggest slogan is, you are your future.
Oh, yeah, it's true that the youth have that sense of entitlement. Are they right to have that sense of entitlement? No. The thing is that, yes, you are a leader, not just for, we don't want you to lead tomorrow, but are you leading yourself first? Because nobody will let you lead anything if you cannot lead yourself first. As it has been said before, it starts with personal responsibility. Yeah? And there's a lot of opportunities out here, a lot of them. There's a lot of resources. There's a lot of people who are investing in youth. I mean, it's represented right here. And there's a lot of people who want to hear you. But if you have nothing to say, if you're not bringing solutions, if we are always complaining, you know, if we have nothing to back up anything, then nobody will take us seriously.
The violence that took place in the after the elections of 2007 was when going around the country, as I did for 1.5 years, talking to young people. It was one of the most hugely empowering moments in their lives. That moment when they were able to express themselves in this uncontrolled, violent way. And the challenge has been, okay, how do we channel this energy, this anger, this angst that we see into bringing a positive change within people's lives, because that energy is there.
So what we do by giving young people a powerful voice is teaching them to say no. First, to have informed information so that they can say no. Learn to say no with respect. Learn to say no. Because a lot of the stuff that happens is not good for you. And that's where we hang on to the not good for you. Because we know what's good for us. And that's the thing. And that's why the frustration comes. So out of schizophrenia comes madness, because the situation is mad. And then we get really mad. And then you find those old rural women who say, unless you give me my kanga and my sugar nut, I'm not voting for you. Because I'm mad. Because my situation is bad. Because socially I'm deprived. So corruption, all of what is coming from a situation of people feeling they are being shortchanged. There's no other word for it. Because they know it. Everybody knows what is a life that is worth living. And they're not getting it. And that's what we try and sensitize the young people, children, the kids, the little ones, that they too must play a part. And they are also responsible.
A couple of very, very dynamic friends in Western End. And one of them, she started a school for girls, a value-based school, no rules, no prefects, no bells for time, timeliness, honesty, cleanliness, so basic values and the girls would sit, and they still do, every Saturday morning and discuss amongst themselves, what does each value mean to us and how are we going to bring it to life in our own lives? And I've been going there, every year, once or twice a year, and watching this amazing transformation over the last 5 years now. It's Butere High. They actually did a TEDx with Miss Were about it. It's extraordinary. And what's special about it is that you enter the corruption and the values debate through, in a sense, through people's souls. You don't programatize it. It's not. It's a girls, and they sit down, and they're the ones. One of the decisions they made quite early, which really impressed me, was timeliness is important. It's an important thing. So, 5 minutes before the next class, one of the girls puts up their hands and says, "Excuse me, teacher, the next class is about to start. Thank you." So, they then quick step. So if you see the class is changing, it's like these little marching young ladies, sort of quick jogging from one class to the other. The choice was made by them. When I talk to the parents at Parents' Days meeting and all that, when we visit, the most interesting thing is not the fact that the school has done extraordinarily well in terms of academic performance. It's just been stratospheric. However, the parents are very keen to say this is not the most important thing. The key thing is that my daughter now says, please. My daughter says, thank you. My daughter says, sorry. They're not fighting with a brother and a sister. They've become more honest. And that's what the parents are emphasizing. And I think, for me, it's the girls, it's them changing them, because they make their own choices. I mean, last year I went there, they formed a bank called the Samaritan Bank, where they lend each other money because some girls are poorer than others, and pencils run out, rubbers, and that kind of thing. So you need 50 shillings. And those kind of innovations have come out of the youth, unprovoked, unprogrammed completely. And I think that's where those are the answers for Kenya's problems, in my opinion.
People look at young people as problem. If about 20 of them walk in now, most of you will be a bit uncomfortable because you'll be seeing violence. we don't see young people as contributors, people who also need to participate in decision making.
One of the things that we really need to do as a society and as a country is to stop glorifying darkness, you know, and start celebrating positive examples, start talking about light. Because I think we are so obsessed and overwhelmed by talking about the bad things that are happening other than talking about the good things that are happening. Two, I think as young people, we must not look at someone else to bring solutions. We must try and do something ourselves. And I'm saying that with regard to myself. I was born and brought up in Korogosho, and for many years we saw our parents and people living in Korogosho talk about poverty, harsh realities, and poverty-related problems. And as young people, we said, no, we can't just talk, we need to do something. And we came up with various initiatives. Today, if you go to Korogosho, which for many years, a while back was known for negative things, and people talked about Korogosho in bad light, today people talk about Korogosho in very positive light.
This has been an exciting, exhilarating experience in the sense that, you know, many universities, many organizations that do this kind of thing would give you a thick book, glossy, lots of tables and graphs. But I think we've got to be mindful that we're targeting and doing this on behalf of youth and organizations that do things on behalf of youth. This is about action. And these action-oriented kinds of organizations don't have time to look at this glossy stuff. They would like, at least in many ways without us patronizing that whole process, to give them access to information which they can use whichever way they choose, so that they become agents and drivers of how they consume that information. So that's why we've departed away from this thick, glossy, hand-me publication to doing a data portal. And over the next couple of days, what we're going to do with our tech people and Code for Africa and Aga Khan University is to make sure that this data is absolutely usable, the easy steps to follow, to print out, to do all kinds of things. We're going to bring back the questionnaire questions into the database, into the portal, and people can see what kinds of questions we asked, and they can also formulate questions of their own. They can dig deeper and see relationships, as was demonstrated during the meeting. There are many dimensions of the data. The data is not flat. It's multi-layered, and there are many ways you can triangulate the data. For instance, looking at unemployment, you can look at the gender dynamics around unemployment. You can disaggregate by gender, you can disaggregate by region, you can look at it by levels of education, for instance. And if you look at the possibilities of utilizing the data, it's extremely limited if it is just a thick book. If it's 500 pages, it puts you off. So I think the best way to deal with this is to create this data portal. And there's a commitment from Aga Khan University and our donors to make sure that this data is in the hands of the people who want to use it, and for free.